Hello, friends, and welcome to the Particularly Peculiar Podcast. My name is Christian.
And my name is Taylor.
We are your hosts.
We are.
Your hosts.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Really. I feel really good about everything we've been doing lately, and I've really enjoyed everybody tuning in.
Yeah, guys, we saw a new listener from Italy.
We did.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that.
We have several countries now.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
In our listener pool, which is wonderful. And then we had the development of the website, which if you didn't hear on the last episode, we do have our new website, particularlypeculiar.com. And if you don't know how to spell that, Google will help you.
I mean,
and you will find it.
You could look at what you're listening to right now.
Just look at the title.
And you can spell it.
Up there.
Yep.
And spell it.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful website, curated by yours truly.
It's pretty cool.
It is pretty neat. You'll find all of our handles there for social media. You'll find a contact form if you want to send us some topics, send us some spooky stories we should share. We would love to start doing a listener submitted story section or just entire episodes based solely on that. So make sure you're checking out the website and sending us all of your things.
Send us all of your things.
Yeah.
Guys, I just had COVID, okay?
Yep.
And
The
our
Roni.
and I haven't had to work in like 2-3 weeks. And I had to go back to work today.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really rough. I'm really
Yeah.
tired. I didn't feel very good.
Right.
And
Yeah, this is fresh after a shift.
yeah. So
Just slammed one peanut butter and jelly sandwich,
yeah,
a bag of Lay's potato chips.
a whole
Small
small snack bag.
Yeah, a snack bag, not a whole bag. And here we are,
Yes.
ready to record.
Yes. What are we talking about today?
Well, we are going to talk about asylums, lunatic asylums, madhouses, whatever you call them. I'm going to be bringing you the history of these asylums and really mental health in general. And this will end up being a 2-part series. I believe it'll be fairly long. And next week, we'll bring you the second part, which will be led by Taylor.
Yes. So I want to discuss some of the treatments, if you can call them treatments, of
Right.
the early mental health care, if you can call it that.
Right. So-called. We're using air quotes.
Yeah, literally while we're talking to each other. But I will be covering treatments of the early mental health care.
Right.
And I will also be bringing you, I think we may do a haunted asylum
That'd be
in the
fun.
next episode. We
That'd be
may.
fun.
We may.
There's a lot of those.
Who knows? Maybe we'll turn it into a 3-parter.
17
Oh
parts.
my gosh, I don't know. We'll
all
see.
on asylums. There's a lot going on with the asylum history, really.
There's so much. I mean, I think I made a long list of all the things I wanted to cover, like, different treatments, asylums, cruel and unusual punishments, really, things like that. So we're kind of going to be wrapping a lot of it into one, two. And I'm sure we will get to some hauntings. I'm sure we will get into some hauntings, obviously with how gruesome some of that stuff was. I feel like it's going to be very likely that most of them have some residual energy there.
Right. See, and that's like really the aftermath of the poor treatment of patients, which led to then the hauntings of said asylums.
I think one of the biggest things that kind of surprises people, well, I guess it surprised me, is like how recent a lot of these asylums actually are. Like a lot of them closed just within the past 30 years. Or some of them didn't even close. They technically just,
reformatted.
Yeah. So it's like I mean, obviously, mental health care has to reform somewhere, but it's amazing. Obviously, when I do my second part, we'll get into that a little bit more, but
Right.
it's crazy.
It is. Yep. And I'm going to touch a lot on the very far back history of these asylums, which I didn't realize,
It's
and
extensive.
well, not necessarily just the asylums, but the development of mental health treatment,
Mm-hmm.
air quotes again, mental health treatment and how far back it goes.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Dating back centuries, the treatment of individuals with mental illness has been rocky at best, with the earliest recordings thousands of years into BC times. The history is widespread among the major geological locations such as early Mesopotamia, China, India, Greece, and more. Although mental illness is generally categorized into three major explanations, being supernatural, biological, and psychological, early consideration was vastly contributed to the supernatural, most notably religion.
Yes, of course.
Right, has to be. Initial beliefs were that having a mental illness was a sign of the battle between good and evil, usually the work of the devil. However, early descriptions and classifications of mental illness were so vast and vague, it's difficult to determine which illness they compare to in modern medicine. Because really, back then, whatever they wanted to be a mental illness was, you know, if they
She's
just,
on her period. She's insane.
right, if they just didn't like it, they were like, oh, that's the work of the devil,
Yes.
and changes in the belief of mental illness causation began with the expansion of philosophy and early formations of cognitive science, which is the scientific study of the mind and its processes, including memory, reasoning, and emotion. Philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle cited the importance of psychoanalytical thought, including dreams and fantasies, which later developed into the foundations of those cognitive sciences. They were also early proponents of the humane treatment of individuals with mental illness. When Hippocrates, the father of medicine, identified syphilis as a disease, he started the idea that psychological disorders were biologically caused. So, really, what these guys were doing was realizing that it wasn't all just some supernatural, the evil inside you. It was just the mind and the body, were creating these ailments, which they weren't specifically talking about mental illness, as we see it today,
Mm-hmm.
but just in general. While the consensus of past psychological treatment is grim, there are reports of humane treatment throughout history. For instance, in ancient China, circa 1100 BC, treatments which fell under the traditional Chinese medicine, including the use of herbs, acupuncture, and emotional therapy, were commonly used. Unfortunately, research concludes that poor treatment of mental health patients was the majority, all the way down to the titles given to those suffering, including madmen, lunatics, crazy, insane, and many more. So not only were they struggling with these, they were also called pretty rude things.
Yeah, of course.
For centuries, mental illness was deemed a family problem, with little to no resources in the community. People deemed insane were generally kept chained down in institutional settings such as madhouses, monasteries, or special cells set aside just for them. Several psychiatric hospitals were opened in the 15th century all around Europe. But the most notorious hospital was the Priory of St. Mary of Bethlehem Hospital in London, England, which is now known better as Bedlam, which opened in 1247. When you search a lot of asylum history, this one comes up a lot.
Yeah.
It was really known for the horrible treatment of patients that were in.
I mean, yeah, imagine even treating people for anything in the 1200s,
Yeah, 1247 it
let
opened. Yeah,
alone something as complex as
mental.
mental illness. I
Yeah,
mean, even today, we are like just now getting to really kind of understanding mental illness, diagnosing mental illness, what causes mental illness. I mean, but even now it's not a perfect science by any
no,
means because it's
and we're not.
extensive.
And really, like you said, we're only just beginning. It seems, but yet it goes back so far.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the point of saying like the treatment, quote unquote,
Yeah,
because what treatment was it? Really, at that point, it's this person is an issue for me, so I'm going to have them locked away in a cell.
yeah. In the 17th century, there were many public, charitably funded institutions. However, the model began to change over to a more privately funded hospital. Early British American colonies began to develop their own hospitals in the mid to late 1700s. The Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia was founded in 1751, and a portion of this hospital was set aside for the mentally ill. Eastern State Hospital in Williamsburg, Virginia was founded in 1768 with the name Public Hospital for Persons of Insane or Disordered Minds.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a title.
I love it. It's just so welcoming.
Making it the first state to establish an institution solely for the purpose of treating the mentally ill. So around this time is really when these hospitals were starting to open up, like, yeah, solely for treating mentally ill
Yeah, that's like the
patients.
1800s.
Yeah. Yep. So before that, it was hospitals that had, like a separate wing for patients with mental illness. Due to lack of regulatory measures from local governments, a trend began which was deemed the trade in lunacy, prompting dozens of privately run facilities to be opened without regulation. These facilities were filled with private, middle-class, fee-paying patients, concluding that many of these facilities were actually opened merely as a business venture and not from a place of compassion.
Does not sound familiar, like
The prison
privately
system.
owned prisons.
Yeah, so really this whole trade in lunacy was kind of a big deal. I mean, there were so many like entrepreneur type people just opening these facilities where people would have to pay to be there, and whether it was a family member paying, say it was a high profile family paying to have their unruly child, kept at one of these facilities. That's just really how they made money. And it's really just pretty ridiculous. However, while the private sector was growing significantly, the public sector grew as well. The public facilities accepted pauper patients, which, in other words, were the poor supported by the government, essentially. So the public sector was charitably funded or state funded in order to house the more poor patients.
Which is similar to today. We
Yep,
still have that, obviously.
we do. Attitudes during the Age of Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries changed the view of lunacy into a disorder that required compassionate treatment. William Tuke and his family became known as founders of moral treatment and the development of radical new types of institutions in northern England at the turn of the 19th century. Many laws and acts were established in the 19th century to protect those that are mentally ill, such as the 1808 County Asylums Act formed in England, which established public mental health asylums in Britain that could be operated by the county government and therefore regulated.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the Lunacy Act of 1845, which changed the status of mentally ill people to patients that required treatment. As progress on mental health was expanding exponentially around this time, many people developed their own ideas on how to help, including the Kirkbride Plan, which was an architectural style of facility meant to have a curative effect on patients. And this method was used in many hospitals that were built in the United States. It was some special design that was supposed to help cure these patients. While on paper, all these developments appear to be making leaps and bounds in the industry, there were still many flaws, including the mistreatment and poorly diagnosed women in psychiatric institutions, as to no surprise. During the mid to late 19th century, women were placed in mental institutions for behaving in ways that the male society did not agree with.
Which was literally everything that
which
they
was
did
all
ever.
things. Which was all things. Which
I can't even think about it. I mean,
Right.
it's something that we would have to get into on
Yeah,
a different day, but
that's a whole
my
nother
goodness.
peculiar
Yeah,
topic.
so literally the word hysteria comes from like the word uterus, like hysterectomy,
Right.
because of
Hysteria.
crazy women.
Women. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Many women could be placed in an institution just for having strong opinions.
Yes. Being too loud,
Just
being
ridiculous.
too vocal,
Yeah.
caring too much about something in particular.
Yeah, just having their own ideas.
Speaking out against their husband.
Right. And there were also financial incentives because before 1882, all of a wife's assets passed directly to her husband. So, husbands be out there dropping off their wives saying, she's got strong ideas, and these facilities are like, oh yeah, we'll take care of her, and then
She's a lunatic.
yeah, just take all of her stuff when you leave. Ridiculous. And this was like the late 1800s into
Yes.
1900,
Yes.
which is not that long ago
No.
in consideration of our entire history.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. I don't know what else to say besides ridiculous and insane. So I will repeat those words.
Don't say insane.
Over and
That's
over.
rude.
Oh, okay. Just ridiculous.
You could say that's hysterical.
That's hysterical. With the development of the outlook on mental disorders needing treatment came all the experimental and terrible treatments that we hear of today. The 1900s brought radical physical therapies, including but not limited to insulin shock therapy, barbiturate-induced deep sleep therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, and malarial therapy, which was introduced by Australian psychiatrist Julius Wagner Wareg, I think. Malarial therapy was the method of purposeful introduction of syphilis into patients in order to cure general paresis of the insane, for which he won a Nobel Prize in 1927.
Oh my God.
1927.
Please give me syphilis to treat my insanity.
Yeah. It's crazy. Just here.
Doesn't syphilis cause insanity?
Here's malaria. Yeah, right. It affects the brain.
I'm so confused.
And I don't know. This is just the things they said.
And everyone else was like, wow, this is amazing.
Here's a Nobel Prize. Psychosurgery also began to emerge in the early 1900s. Now, I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Antonio Egas Moniz, maybe?
Question mark?
Yeah. He performed the first lobotomy, which severs connections in the frontal lobe of the brain, in Portugal in 1935, for which he also was awarded a Nobel Prize.
Real groundbreaking stuff.
These guys were out here just...
Okay, they were literally destroying brains.
Just destroying brains and getting prizes.
Yeah, being awarded for it.
Everyone was like,
real nice,
you're awesome.
Guys.
And this was in the early 1900s. This, again, is not that far.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to think how little we actually knew.
Right. And
Just not, I
still,
mean, few short years ago.
right. It's ridiculous.
It's hysterical.
It's hysterical.
It's lunacy.
Walter Freeman further developed the procedure into the transorbital lobotomy, which uses an ice pick and can be done in a mere 15 minutes and needs minimal training. Perfect.
Anybody can do it.
Yeah, this was called an office procedure. So, like, they could just do it very quickly just in the office. It didn't require the surgical theater that most surgeries required back then.
No, they literally would just put that little ice pick hook up in your eye socket, take a mallet,
Zoop.
whack
Bang.
it onto that ice pick,
And
get
then
up and get
you're-
up in your brain.
And you're cured. That's
Wow.
it. Fixed.
You're just non-existent at that point, pretty much.
Yeah, you lose pretty much everything.
And then they would just wheel you off to a room to recover.
Right.
Just leave you there,
Yeah, he's going to need some time after this.
I'd say.
Terrible. Psychiatric drugs also entered the scene during the 20th century, mostly the later 20th century, introducing many mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, and antidepressants, prompting a movement for the deinstitutionalization of patients. Seen as there was mass overcrowding, funding cuts, and abuse rampant in many asylums, it was viewed that the drugs made it possible for patients to be safely released from the institutions and just put back out into public.
Well, I mean, it's just like now, as
Yeah.
we would be able to be on our antidepressants or antipsychotics and
Yep.
go on about our daily lives. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, could you imagine? I mean, I very clearly would have been locked in an asylum
Right.
if I would have been born a few hundred years earlier.
First of all, you're a woman.
Yeah, so obviously.
Strike one.
I mean, you might as well not
Well,
even.
maybe that's 3 strikes.
No, that is.
That's all you needed
Yes.
back then.
I had a uterus.
You had a uterus.
So-
You still have a uterus.
Yeah.
So you're still in danger.
I mean, I hope not, but
So that brings us to the current state of mental health development that relies heavily on medication and lacks the structure needed to process the ever-growing population with mental health issues. So we've really kind of touched on this a little bit, but the structure now is to basically just heavily medicate and send you on your way.
pretty much.
And there is, we do have access to therapy, but once again, it's mostly like we'll see you for an hour, once a month or whatever, give you drugs, and then you just go about your life.
And hopefully that's sufficient for
And hopefully that's enough.
most people. It's
Right.
kind of crazy because now we're at this point where we really need places like mental health hospitals, inpatient settings
Yeah.
for care because there's not enough resources to properly care for everybody that has any sort of mental health issue or mental health crisis.
Right.
I mean, it's just not possible. It's not feasible.
It seems like there really isn't a lot of middle ground between either being institutionalized, being committed either in a prison, unfortunately, or in some sort of asylum scenario, and then on the other end where you're just expected to live a normal daily life just being medicated. And it doesn't seem to be much middle ground, as of right now.
I'm obviously a big advocate for therapy. I think talk therapy is extremely helpful and extremely important. And I do think, of course, medication is also extremely important. But I think there is so much that's just being kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's being kind of like delegated elsewhere. Like
Yeah.
the primary care doctor is supposed to take care of it. We are supposed to have all these, self-care and whatever tools and resources to deal with our own mental health issues. But it's like realistically, in a perfect world that would work, but it's too complex. It's too complex to just give a medication, talk to someone, an hour a month, and that's it. Like, that's
Right.
not anything that is going to be sustainable. Our populations that suffer from mental illness is extensive, massively extensive.
And a lot goes undiagnosed.
Absolutely.
Due
Or just
to,
untreated.
well, right. And due to the stigma that has been around for centuries, which we just discussed,
Right, because you're all psycho.
you're all insane, psycho, lunatic madmen,
Yes.
and really that stigma still hasn't fallen off completely, which I'm not sure when it will. I mean, like, it's changed, over the years, and
We're
you
moving in the
really,
right direction, at least.
right. And you do see a lot with social media,
Yeah.
sharing the feelings, on social media, like, you're not alone. A lot of us have these same feelings. And also with the emergence of a lot of telemed type situations where
Yes.
you can get, you can have therapy done at your house if you don't have the means to do it, which, I mean, if you just have a phone,
But I
that's
also
all you need.
think that is for a lot of people that are on like one end of the spectrum, you know?
Yeah, it is very broad.
So, I mean, it's like for people that have maybe some more mild mental health issues, all these things are
True.
great. But
Right.
there's so many other diagnoses, there's so many other mental illnesses that need more care and more, that needs watched over a little more.
Right.
And I mean, because that's just talking about, oh, your run of the mill, probably anxiety and depression. What about every other single mental illness that there is,
Yeah, you're right.
and more severe? And it's like, well, like I was saying, we're just truly lacking inpatient care. We're truly lacking the actual resources to care for
Right.
people who have more of the more serious mental illness.
So, and maybe in our second part, you'll go into more of those more moderate to severe type of diagnoses.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you guys. I don't really know how my part is going to turn out, because the more we talk about it, there's more and more that I want to say.
Which
So
is why this could turn into like a 12-part
yeah,
series.
exactly. We warned you at the very beginning. Okay, we already told you.
So, I mean, you can tell that we're very passionate about mental health. And when we talk about it, we can go on for a very long time. And I know you have a lot to say.
I do have a lot to say.
You know,
Next week, I just can't wait to dive into all that, early mental health treatment and all the different procedures,
right.
treatments that they utilized, what they thought was good
Good.
for our brains. And it
Yeah, for real.
really wasn't.
They were out there straight just messing with brains like, I wonder what this does.
Yeah, like, come on, guys.
Syphilis?
Jeez.
Ice pick?
So I can't wait to dive into more of that. And there's just so much
Right.
that we are going to be able to discuss.
I'm excited too, because you always bring the heat
I
with
try.
your research and your stuff. Sometimes, guys, I just start saying things and I don't know what I'm talking about.
More like 100% of the time, that's what he does.
More like all the time, I just talk
Yes.
words. I just spew words, and
He just opens his mouth and sounds come out, and he has no plan.
sporadically they turn into full sentences.
Yes.
So,
That's naturally why we have a podcast.
exactly. And I can edit all that post-production, which is wonderful.
Yay.
It makes me sound intelligent. No, it doesn't. But that's okay. Well, I think that is going to do it for today. That was a good one, I think. I'm really excited to hear your part next week. Make sure, everybody, to visit particularlypeculiar.com, where you can find all of our social links. Go to all those things, follow, like, comment, subscribe, the whole thing. Also, find us on YouTube. We will see you again.
Until next time,
Our peculiar people.